Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley Stanhope. I'm the founder and CEO of Hardfork Media as a small PR crypto agency based in New York. Before crypto, I was a journalist for about 10 years and then segued into crisis communications around COVID, mostly working with big tech clients. So that's really where I cut my teeth in that industry and then also carried that over to the Web3 space. So that's me.
Cool. Hey everybody, Kevin Dinino. Glad to be back here again. So I've got over 20 years of experience in communications. I work as a communications consultant for a lot of fintech and crypto companies, and also relevant to this conversation, do a lot of work in cybersecurity communications as well. I sit on the board of the San Diego Cyber Center of Excellence, and have really enjoyed kind of interacting with that group as well here. So excited to have a great convo and hopefully answer some questions and go from there.
Fabulous. So I might kick off, and just while we're waiting for the journalist, do either one of you want to kind of take us through the Bybit hack? Like, I'm not sure how closely you paid attention to it. At like you may not have been paying attention at every single juncture, but like, what were the marquee comms moments for you throughout the kind of the Bybit hack?
Sure. Do you mind if I go first, Kevin?
Yeah, please.
So the CEO, Ben Zo, the initial comms went out about the hack about, I think, 30 minutes after he was briefed on the incident and discovered the incident. So he actually took to Twitter and he released a statement in crisis comms. We usually call this a holding statement. And timing really matters with this. So basically what you know up until that point, and then what you're doing as a leader. And I think one of the things that worked really well with this is the comms came from the top. So obviously building on that trust and transparency, when anything sensitive or erupts or there's a crisis situation, people really want to hear from. And then the other thing that really jumped out at me was like within 2 hours, maybe he hopped on a live stream. So it wasn't even a recorded video. It was, hey, I'm gonna put myself out there in the public, answer questions, tell everybody what I know. I wouldn't necessarily recommend this for everyone. I think it comes down to who the leader is, because some people are just naturally more comfortable on camera. You'd be surprised working in communications, you meet a lot of very smart founders, but they freeze up. The natural tendency is to kind of revert or overpromise and make statements that you might end up having to walk back. So it can be really risky. This was pulled off very exceptionally well, I think. And he also just, again, you have to tap into the mind of your investor or your clientele. What are the questions that they want to know? So, okay, where are business operations at that point in time? What is happening with withdrawals? Like, is there an update on reserves? All of these like pertinent questions. You might not have all of the answers to them, but I think it's important to show that, hey, we're here, we're in the trenches with you. We're not going dark. That builds trust and is a good sign. So that was my initial take. I'll let Kevin share his thoughts.
I think I agree at a high level with Ashley. But that said, we'll play a little counterpoint here too. I think the initial reaction, and frankly, just having the CEO Ben being available immediately, really, I feel like was urgent and that he had to. It's a $1.5 billion hack, a massive, one of the largest hacks impacting the industry. And frankly, there's really a low bar in the crypto industry in terms of communicating hacks. And so being out there immediately, being actually on video, I think was a big win too. It definitely helped. Now that said, from a crisis standpoint, I agree with Ashley in that it was, maybe a little bit of case by case. I think Ben wanted to stem the tide of whether it's withdrawals coming from a $1.5 billion hack as well. Bybit could be insolvent in a matter of hours. If ETH holders and folks that work with them aren't, kind of persuaded to kind of stay as well. Now, that said, though, I think there's a lot to really unpack when it comes to just the hack in general, and a lot of critique of the hack and the communications of it too. There's been 570 billion wiped out from this hack as well. So let's not forget that. Like, it was a pretty significant market making event. Market's down. ETH is down about 25% since then as well. So there's a lot of repair still needed on that front. And maybe too, Ashley, we can talk too. I think a lot of what came out of that for the group too would almost be somewhat of a masterclass. I think the initial reaction was, wow, this is great. The company's done a nice job being transparent, being, expedient, absolutely on point. That said, now we're 3-4 weeks after the hack, and there's an argument to be made, one by me, that Bybit now has turned it into a PR event. Bybit put out a press release saying, I'll just read the headline, Bybit defies odds, how the largest crypto hack in history became a test of resilience and transparency. And that one, I'm biting my tongue a little bit because, there's 1.5 billion still missing. There's been a crypto group that's helped recover about 9 million or so as well, but that money's gone. Lazarus Group, a well-known North Korean hacking organization, largely responsible for this, and still is a huge issue in the crypto space. But what I don't like is how Bybit is kind of turning this into a press tour. Look at us getting pats on the back. The industry was great. We've all come together. When the reality is still, it was a massive hack, tons of funds missing, and it really puts a huge bullseye on them now going forward from a reputational standpoint. And so I think there's the element of crisis in the moment is one thing, but what happens afterwards in your next move, it could be just as important. And what they're doing now, again, my opinion, is dangerous. And it likely is dangerous for peers in the space as well, because it seems to be they're turning this into a PR event of how great their crisis response was, when in fact it was good, but I don't think it was a masterclass by any means.
Did you look like you were going to hop in,
Yeah,
Ashley?
I was going to say, I do feel that, yeah, you don't want to toot your own horn in situations like that. I think let other people say it, but you don't say it. There was already good coverage, like on, coming out, not just in the media, but just like people saying things on Twitter and online. I think it's really important to separate yourself from that. Just let that breathe naturally. The second point I will make that I think is important. So obviously you deal with the explosion in any crisis. You have to release initial statements, follow-ups, what happened, where the investigation is now, where, tracing the funds on chain, who are you working with? Who are your partners? I think that's important. But what I actually really admire about their follow-up comms is the CEOs started a bounty now, the War on Lazarus, that's actually uniting the community, because it's like bringing people together, showing, hey, this is going to take all hands approach. I think that's a good way to get buy-in from the community to help you try to overcome these hackers. Obviously, they're very sophisticated, the Lazarus Group, but they've traced a lot of the funds. They know how much is frozen, how much has been reclaimed, and how much is gone. And so I think the continuation of still providing updates is really important in this case. And also it makes them look good, quite frankly, because a lot of times people just want to deal with the mess and then move on and then hope, finger to the wind, everyone forgets about it. But I think this is really good in this case, and the proof of reserves as well. The third party audits are important.
Absolutely,
yes.
Absolutely. If I could just really quick add to that, I think a nice touch, no doubt on that, and I think clearly, a nice differentiator too, and the fact that the community kind of came together. That said, I think the crypto space still is very much ripe for hacking, and so perhaps this is an opportunity for the industry to really kind of button up its cybersecurity as a whole, because the numbers are continuing to increase in terms of the billions that are being hacked, with Lazarus likely being kind of one of the bigger players in the space. So to that end, I think the industry is sorely lacking and needs folks like Ben and others in the community to be leaders, but to ultimately to have a stronger incident response plan, crisis comms around hacks. And if I put my cybersecurity hat on, like a lot of the message and that I have with clients is always, it's not a matter of if, it's always going to be when. When you get hacked, what's the response going to be? How do we communicate it? And I think Ashley touched on a lot of the tactics in terms of things like holding statements and speed, and making sure each audience is acknowledged as well. So it's a nice opportunity.
I think there was a couple of things popping out from what both of you were saying, and to double back to what Ashley was saying in relation to tactics. When I joined the live stream, I was kind of like, wow, this would never have been in my playbook. Just to speak very frankly, like I don't think I ever would have advised somebody to do that, because there's so much chaos involved in it. And just like thinking about the fact that it is, as far as I know, the largest digital kind of heist that is, yeah. So like with all of that chaos at play, I would never have suggested doing that. And then I had the thought, I was like, are we now going to see this happen more? Are we going to see people respond with that tactic as kind of like a, because I think Ashley, I think you were alluding to it being, circumstantial, that like that wouldn't suit everybody, but there could also be a bit of a, I suppose, a bias. Well, if they did it, we should do it. So that's kind of the first thing I wanted to double back on. And yeah, I've one or two more bits, but
Yeah,
Ashley,
yeah,
if you want to
no,
speak to that.
that's a good point. I always recommend, getting, and obviously not trying to promote my business or anything, but get an outsider's perspective, like somebody who has worked in this field and helped other companies navigate crisis situations. I think they have seen a lot. They know what happens on both sides. Everybody's different. Some CEOs are very public facing. They have no problems being on camera, talking, not oversharing, over promising things. And I think that can go a long way to use that skill to their and the company's advantage. However, it's a stressful period, right? You can't underestimate that. And people will say things that they might have to walk back, like I said earlier, or overpromise just because they do want to get out of the hot seat, or they just want to reassure people and calm the waters. But one of the interesting things was, and the timeline of when the CEO said the reserves, every asset's fully backed, but then there was a run on bank scenario like hours later where $10 billion was withdrawn from the Bybit platform. And then there was a community, like partners and competing exchanges, and everybody kind of rallied around them to help replenish the reserve. I think it's just, you have to be very careful when you make statements like that, because you don't know what's going to happen next. Obviously, if I think it was great that so many people stepped up to help Bybit. I think obviously it shows that they have a great standing and reputation in the industry, very different from the FTX situation. However, not to over-index on the relationships with people, but people, like, the industry doesn't want another situation like FTX, where it sends markets into a tailspin and contagion spreads. So there's sort of like this, unspoken rule almost, that we need to kind of all step up and help each other when a big exchange takes a blow like this. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, and adding on that, there is no government bailout, right? As well, if everything does potentially fail too, much like the kind of the financial crisis that happened in 08 and 09, where, the government largely kind of took over the situation, and taxpayers as well. And so the really the big thing that's going to happen next is the next steps for Bybit in this situation, in terms of how can they communicate, continue to communicate how they're fixing so this won't happen again. And so it's probably more of the technical, how, improvements that they're making to their systems and processes to prevent a hack. A lot of the criticism they took from a few competitors in terms of this was quote unquote preventable too. I think that's going to be the reputational hit, not only for Bybit, but for others in the space that are going to really need to hone in on, one, what's our crisis playbook, but then ultimately, like, how do we fix these scenarios to make ourselves not as prone to large hacking groups that can essentially shut not only an exchange down, but ultimately have a massive impact on market sentiment, knowing that, the beauty of crypto is there's a decent amount of regulation, but there is no backing. It's the community as a whole, or in many cases, a private and or public company too. And so there's ultimately an inherent risk. And as if as a retail investor, you want to be assured that your money is safe. Clearly, we know that there's risks, and you have to have a fairly high risk tolerance to invest in crypto. We get that, but then adding this new layer, can potentially impact both retail and institutional buyers as well.
Thank you both. I'm going to call on Naga here, because I believe he's arrived, and Naga actually wrote with crypto.news on the Bybit hack. So just be interested in getting his perspective on obtaining info from Bybit as well. And I'll post the article in the chat too. So have at it.
Hi guys, great to be here. Sorry I tuned in a little late. It's funny that on a day like this, I'm covering another crazy story because I've moved over to the block now, and there's been the whole hyperliquid situation there to cover. So I kind of took my time before I was able to join. But like Caolan said, I was over at crypto.news when the Bybit hack happened, and I remember seeing it maybe 2-3 minutes after Ben had posted, and immediately going to the news desk and then posting it, and it was crazy, right? And as a journalist in that moment, a lot of things are going through your mind. There's a lot of, it's an information barrage. Everything is coming at you 180 miles an hour. You're trying to verify this, you're trying to verify that. And I think within the hour, Ben says, "Oh, there's going to be a live stream," and I'm thinking, "Yeah, there's no way he's doing that. There's just no way. One of the largest financial hacks in history has happened, and you're going to open a live stream and show your face, because you must be getting a ton of messages. It's a high pressure situation. You're trying to contain all of that." And to his credit, he actually did it. I was surprised that he did. I'm not going to lie, but it was surreal in a way. And as a journalist who was trying to verify a lot of information at the time, it was also helpful because for us on the news desk, we didn't have to text anyone. In that moment, their press team is packed. They're probably hands off the laptop and just trying to get information within the company and be aligned and all of that. So not having to go through, that process was kind of great, to be able to get information directly from the source, and, just have my little notebook and my pen, and, I'm writing out quotes from what he's taking. So on that level, it was, you never really want to report that kind of story, right? But you have to. It's your job, it's your duty, and you have to get the facts right. So from a neutral standpoint, it was great to. It almost felt like a 1v1. It felt like, Ben was talking to me while I was at my desk, and he was walking me through what was happening and giving me updates. So that was great. Because like I said, there have been a lot of comparisons with the FTX debacle and what happened. And if you compare it with what SBF was doing at the time, it's a completely different reaction, right? It's a completely different way to handle crisis comms. where Ben was having a live stream and keeping the community abreast about what was going on. SBF was on Twitter tweeting what? And for me at the time when FTX blew up, I worked at a company called Ethereum World News, and FTX was personal for me because at the time we had 80% of our operational funds deposited on FTX. So when FTX blew up, yeah, we were screwed. And we didn't know until after the fact, right? And then 90% of the editorial team ended up being laid off. I was the only one writing there for about 3 months. So it was crazy, right? And then this is another major hack happening. And the way that the guy in charge is handling it is absolutely completely different. It feels personal. We're getting information directly from the source. So as a journalist, I think the tag of masterclass in crisis comms in that moment was absolutely valid and absolutely fair. I agree with Kevin when he says that, they are maybe milking it a lot now, there's a lot of, tooting their own horn and all of that. And to some degree, I also understand why. Because again, FTX happened, and I think between FTX and Bybit, we've had DMM Bitcoin Exchange. We've had a couple of, big hacks, but nothing really on the same level. So I kind of understand why Ben might be a little bit cocky the way he's been handled. But yeah, there are still a lot of questions. Like Kevin said, there's still a huge amount of money that's missing. So there are still a lot of questions about that. But I think the reaction in the moment, the live stream was super unprecedented, and I didn't believe how he was actually going to do it till I saw his face on there. But I applaud him for that. It took a lot of balls to do what he did. And um, touching on what Ashley said, we don't know if that's going to be the bar, but he has set a bar. Now, if a hack happens on an exchange, everyone, whether they think it or know it, is going to be expecting the founder to come on a live stream, is going to be expecting the founder to be in the firing line, is going to be expecting the founder to be very, very public, very, very visual, very, very available. I don't know if every single case, will be able to do that. We hope, obviously, that another hack of that magnitude doesn't happen, because 1.5 billion is it's not a splash in the pond by any means. But yeah, I think whether intentionally or unintentionally, Ben has set a bar, and it's unfortunate that more hacks will happen, whether we want them to or not. It's the industry that we are in, and the North Korean guys don't play around. So it will be interesting to see how other people react to that. But I don't know if everyone will be able to or should actually react in the way that Ben did. But kudos to him.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Caolan, go ahead.
I was actually just going to call because just to that last point there, we have a question from the crowd, from Megan Gavis at Filecoin. What would be your strategy for messaging on those technical and security upgrades after the fact, to regain trust without turning it into a PR campaign? And I actually think that touches on things that you said, Ashley, and Kevin and Naga. So I'll let you have at it.
Yeah, I just want to address a couple points. So Naga, what you were saying about setting the bar, it sort of set the precedent now that any future hack that occurs, CEOs are going to be compared to this, right? And I think that's fair. I think I don't think everybody has to hop on a 2-hour live stream, but I think making yourself available for 30 minutes, keeping it tight, answering questions, having a crisis team brief you ahead of time if you're not somebody who's very comfortable dealing with a crisis, but you're a founder and a CEO. I think having people that can prepare you at a moment's notice, and a lot of this can actually be done ahead of time as well, like tabletop exercises, even with the security upgrades. Ben Zo was saying to the New York Times he did have some security concerns about the ledger's ability to upgrade with safe software, and there was a vulnerability there. He couldn't view the full details of the transaction, even though it was completely musked and it was a backdoor approach from hacking somebody else's computer. I still think if you have doubts, like this is, again, it's easy to deal with the crisis when it happens, but you often miss the warning signs. So that's where like a lot of like prep and training comes into place. So when it does happen, like Kevin says, it's when it happens, not if. You will be ready to kind of jump in on camera. And then Megan's question, how do you kind of help in terms of messaging, technical security upgrades without and repairing trust without turning it into a PR campaign? Honestly, I think exactly what they were doing, minus that big press release that came out with the headline that was very much, here's what we did that was like, phenomenal crisis management, top of the line masterclass. Like, I think not promoting yourselves in that way, but just being open, honest, transparent. Okay, we just published a proof of reserves report. Here it is. This is the third party that's conducting that report. This is what we're doing. This is how we're penetration testing all of our security and making sure all of our dependencies are okay. I think just doing all of that and communicating, continuing to communicate, is going to repair your trust over time. So I think you just don't have to pat yourselves on the back. Let other people do that.
Exactly it. To play off of what you just said, Ashley, it's instead of kind of issuing press releases, et cetera, in many cases, it's going to the press and letting the press tell your story. So whether it's security upgrades, I think Ashley touched on like penetration testing and tabletop exercises, like a lot of the upgrades in preparation beyond sort of the technical upgrades are going to be, in many cases, frankly, playing the white hat in the cybersecurity space in terms of understanding like what are our vulnerabilities, what could be our vulnerabilities, understanding that, but then communicating to the market via the media. We've made significant upgrades. Maybe they end up hiring a CISO, which frankly, I know I don't want to go too far down this, a chief security officer, but a chief security officer in any organization now is a huge player and an important player, and could be an important person in a crisis scenario to play spokesperson potentially as well on more of like the technical issues going on too. The other thing, just from a consistency standpoint, I agree. I think Ben set a great bar. That said, I think the bar was pretty low. But now the bar has been raised as well. And so in order to keep it there needs to be consistent communication. So agreed. It doesn't need to be a 2-hour live stream. If this happened again with a client, let's say that someone like Ashley or I were working with, having more of a consistent update of, yes, the initial comms, but then whether it's a week or 2 weeks later, providing updates and not going dark, and then not necessarily like turning it into a press tour as well, because again, at the end of the day, like the funds are missing. Ben probably needed to do this to ensure his company's survival. Like that's the reality of it. And with that, from a masterclass standpoint, did a great job, at least in the short term, ensuring that, because there could have been an even larger run on ETH and on his company as well.
And just one final point to add on that. I think it's so important. The reason it comes down to timing is you want to own the primary source. You want to be the primary source of communication. You don't want, the media or others reporting what's going on before you've said anything. So I think that's why it was so effective for him to not only tweet about it, but then an hour later hop on a live stream. So like, Naga said, it was great in terms of getting all of the information for his article, because people are going to be reporting on this. They're going to need quotes. The PR people behind the scenes are probably inundated, and then also going through different layers of red tape trying to get quotes to sign off on to give these journalists. So I think doing something like this is going to bridge that gap, because, understanding that you guys have deadlines as well, and it's down to the wire. And the worst thing for a client to see as the company wasn't available for comment. And because, and that's true in some cases, like they weren't, but you want to have, because you're going to have to find other voices, other sources for your story, no matter what. And you're going to pull from Twitter, likely, like if that's where the primary sources are coming from. So it is very important, I think, to make yourself available.
You saw a little bit of that as well. I mean, frankly, a good journalist is going to go to outside sources too. And so you saw like CZ and a few other competitor CEOs start to maybe nitpick a little bit on some of the security flaws and what could have been improved too. And so with that, again, by Ben going out there immediately and doing that, it probably kind of cut the amount that could have been done where you had competing voices, a lot of the critics out there, et cetera, that are likely going to make themselves available for comment to the press. It probably limited that to an extent as well in the moment.
I think that's relevant to the question that was asked by Joyce, who's behind the ACJR network account there, about how do you manage social media when rumors are flying as a crisis unfolds. So yeah, like how do you manage the like varying amount of voices that could be weighing in?
Yeah, I think it's interesting with social media. Like there are some things, if there's an overriding narrative that is playing out, like and you want to address it, that's one thing. But sometimes you don't want to give oxygen to like small accounts that are saying some very inflammatory comments, or it's just not true. And so I think you just continuing to be that source of truth and that single line of communication. This is everything we know. We understand there's a lot of different perspectives. You can kind of cover it that way with the messaging. We understand there's like a lot of different perspectives and people are speculating or saying various things. However, this is what we know up until this point, and this is what we're doing now moving forward. I think social media can be really tricky because people are going to make allegations a lot. And this is some issue I take with the Yap culture as it is now. And, I think people are financially incentivized to Yap. And I kind of think that is a bit problematic because oftentimes people will say crazy things, not necessarily believe it, but just to want to get points or build internet fame. And I think that from a crisis standpoint can come back to haunt you, and it can hurt your reputation. So yeah, I'm very skeptical, but that's my spicy take for today's panel.
I mean, I think just adding to that, using social as your distribution network for the holding statement that Ashley mentioned. And I think you see this in other industries as well. Like when Delta, had a crash, there's ultimately you go on X and it'll give a brief statement in terms of, what's going on, what the next steps are. And then maybe there's a landing page for press with a link, or a contact info for media inquiries. And as a comms person, you're going to get pummeled on that email address or landing page from others. But I agree with Ashley. If you can at least put it out there immediately, maybe not necessarily worry about the interaction as well, because there's going to be a lot of noise. But you're communicating to the market that you're aware of what's going on. Here are the steps that we're taking, and we'll be in touch with an update. And you provide an update once you have gathered more facts, et cetera, as well.
Amazing. That was all very insightful, and if you don't mind me saying, very tied to one type of crisis that can emerge that almost has kind of deterministic things that you can do to address it and manage it. And I think just because of the time, it's a good time to kind of segue into another type of crisis that can arise, one of whatever you want to call it, ignorance, blindness, being tone deaf, whatever it might be, but a crisis that emerges from your own actions, and something that might filter through multiple layers of approval without ever getting flagged. And to just call it out very specifically, this ad that landed a couple of weeks ago, I guess, from Solana. And so I guess, it's nearly the other end of the spectrum of the type of crisis that could arise. I kind of want to leave it open because I know that there might be varied opinions on it. The industry came out very staunchly against the messaging that was in it. And I'm not really going to play devil's advocate. It was quite a strange one for me, and I don't know if I've quite wrapped my head around what they were going for just yet. But that's why we have expert insights, and I would love to hear from both of you on what your kind of thoughts were, and yeah, any other kind of lessons to draw from the whole fiasco.
I'm happy
Kevin,
to, yeah, I'm happy to take this one first. Yeah,
Good.
sure.
Okay.
And then
Yep.
would love to hear what Naga thinks too.
Yeah.
You know, I kind of learned about this probably like others and just hopping on X and actually watching it. And I probably had to watch it like 10 times to just fully like understand like what in the heck am I watching right now? And what comes back to me is the word that kind of stands out to me is immaturity. And just in terms of, without even like digging too deep in terms of like the attempted message, clearly they were trying to do a pun or a play on sort of the woke culture kind of going on, et cetera. And there's this, you know, clearly partisan divide on two topics, and maybe they were kind of catering to the current administration's take on that topic. But even just like trying to hone in, and when you go through the process of creating an ad, just understanding who your audience is. And so like my main takeaway is like a simple focus group or two in terms of testing this ad amongst various demographics probably would have yielded feedback similar to what they actually experienced as well. And so some of it is just like, was this properly like thought of and planned out if spending likely millions, you know, we'll say hundreds of thousands, but ultimately maybe millions of dollars on the production and promotion of an ad. And then the second part is the flip-flop. When brand, and I think that's a huge no-no, meaning if you felt so strong as a brand to have a pretty provocative ad, but then bend immediately and flip-flop pretty quickly, then it tells me, you know what, this really wasn't too well thought through, or there's an element that they were just trying to create some buzz. I hope that's not the case, but you never know these days either. But and so the flip flop and then the taking down of it just shows that, you know, if you're going to be bold as a brand, like be bold. But if you're going to, you know, flip flop and change sides and kind of take it down and kind of put your tail between your legs, then for me that's a reputational issue now going forward. So like if they decide to do any form of advertising that's remotely provocative going forward, there's always going to be a little bit of a raised eyebrow, I think, on that side. So yeah, my 2 cents on it.
I think that's, you know, and I wish I had more things to disagree with you on, Kevin, to make it more spicy, exciting panel. But no, I think that, you know, the ad didn't strike me as, you know, especially crypto, really, like the original ethos of the industry was built upon inclusivity. And I think this was really just, you know, very divisive and offensive to a marginalized group of people. And so I think, or a lot of people in general, I think that, you know, Anatoly did break the silence around the ad, which was good. I think, again, if like this type of, you know, communications has to come from the top. I feel like if they remove the ad, the foundation should have put something out as well. Just saying, you know, acknowledging, apologizing to the community for the, what, you know, the upset that it caused, and any corrective action that was being taken. I think it would have been insincere if they sort of tried to display emotion in that statement, which is why I think it was good. Anatoly, you know, came out a couple days later and said that he was really he basically said he was ashamed about downplaying the impact of the ad and called it mean and punching down on a marginalized group of people. And so I think that is meaningful when it comes from a person. That's just something to keep in mind in terms of like communication and distribution. Like when you're like, you know, you have to kind of fix something like this that happened. the thing that I agree with you as well, Kevin, on is, running it by focus groups. Like, this was a highly produced ad. Like, this is obviously something multiple people signed off on. So I really think that, trying to get more feedback and from people that were involved in the ad, I think would have gone a long way.
I
Um,
want to. Oh, Naga, are you hopping in there? Go for it.
yeah, just from like
Please.
journal POV. Kind of like Kevin said, when I woke up, I got on X, and that's how I kind of ran into the ad. I didn't know what to think or take from it at first, but my first thought was like, yeah, this is definitely going to get people talking, and it might not be in the way that Solana intended or wanted. Right then, a couple of minutes or hours later, I hop into the news desk, and the ad is in discussion, and we're trying to see if it's something that we want to cover. But from a news perspective, we didn't really know how to like come at it, because it was just, well, it was what it was, right? And it was kind of hard to tackle it from a neutral POV, because you could kind of tell what they were trying to do, like Evan said, trying to be witty and maybe pander to the Trump administration, and kind of take a jab at the whole woke movement. But it was difficult to, from as a journalist, right? My first thinking is always, can I turn this into a news story, right? It was difficult to kind of do that, and I think the general reaction from our news desk was kind of to just let it play out and allow social media drive the conversation and comment on it. Obviously, there's always going to be media houses that will write pieces about it, and people are always going to have opinions. But yeah, that was my first reaction, was this is going to get people talking. It's definitely going to make a conversation. It might not be too clear if that's the conversation that Solana wanted, because I don't know if that is the reaction that they were expecting, because as Ashley said, an entity like Solana, it's going to go through many desks, and lots of people are going to review and approve it. So I'm not, I don't work there, so I don't know what kind of reaction they were expecting. But I think generally speaking, from an outsider POV and from a journal POV, don't think that is the reaction that they were expecting. They were probably expecting something a little different, maybe something a little positive. But like Ashley said, it was an idea, and it was arguably, like Ashley said, maybe divisive, and maybe not what the industry needs to be focusing on at the moment, especially considering where we are, right? We have a president of the United States who is quite literally shilling Bitcoin. We are about to get regulation, all of the things that crypto people have been shouting for years, that we've wanted. As the stars are finally aligning, and it just feels like, again, from a news perspective, that the conversation should be on that. The conversation should be about driving the industry forward. The conversation should be about making crypto available to everyone, so that we can get away from the traditional banking system that has been screwing people over for years, and get to this technology where everyone has a fair chance to access liquidity, access capital, access transaction ability, and do what they want with their money. It feels like that's where the conversation should be on. And entities that have such a large voice like Solana, I would maybe expect them to be more responsible with that voice. And it's fine for, individual people to have their takes and have their opinions and have, their personal views on things. But I feel like the focus should be, what should we be saying as one industry, and we should be speaking with one voice, and that voice should be forward, ahead, and the future.
Amen to that, and well said. Agreed. I
Yeah,
don't know if are we able to add perspective from someone in the chat actually said that they had some context.
Yeah, absolutely. I was gonna
Please, yeah.
invite Arakia. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, but if you'd like to unmute yourself and yeah, share what you'd like to say.
Yeah, thank you. Just want to introduce myself briefly. I am new to the ACJR network. I have been a journalist for most of my career. I used to be an editor at Wired magazine, and now I am working on solving journalism infrastructure problems using blockchain technology and have a company called Control X. So I've gotten to know the Solana community, at least the German branch, because I'm based in Berlin. And what I understand from my work using their technologies is that it's a very decentralized organization in all senses. So they have 14 hubs that are located in 14 countries, and there are different um, aspects of those hubs that like some talk with each other, some talk with the Solana Foundation, but even at the top tiers, there's different aspects of Solana. So when you say they, like who exactly are we talking about? Because there are so many people involved. And the sense that I've gotten from speaking with people, the leaders of the German community who I communicate with regularly, is that this was not anything that was commissioned by Solana. So there's a platform called Super Team Earn, which is basically like a bounty platform, and it's their way to distribute funds from the foundation to the community. And so what it seems like is that someone made this. I really highly doubt, I can't say for sure, but I highly doubt that there was a significant amount of funds that went toward this from the Solana Foundation, especially in the millions, because this is to promote this conference, Solana Accelerate, which is an American event, like one of the many events that they promote. So I'm guessing it was just someone from the community that had access to the account, probably much lower layers of approval than you might think, which kind of just speaks to like the messy nature of the network, which is so community oriented for better and worse, depending on which community you're looking at. So I hope that adds some context.
It's juicy, and I would love to see some reporting deeper on this if that's the case, because I don't know, Ashley, your take on this, but maybe it's a little bit of decentralization gone amok, and that, typically the head of marketing or a marketing team producing an ad should be talking to the leadership team as well. And so if it was someone in the community, then my cybersecurity alarm bells are ringing of like, if an ad is possible and they don't know about it, like what else is possible? So, but thank you.
Right.
That's super interesting.
I think it's like the classic case of, the intern went rogue, or people think, thinking along those lines. But I mean, it was just, to me, I find it's interesting you say that, because it was just so highly produced, and
Yes.
there were actors involved. There would have been like a pretty big bill. I think like it was very well shot and edited. I don't know how much they would have spent on it, but it does seem like more of a high profile ad rather than just a tweet that went out that was offensive. Like I think that, I personally think if anything goes out from like a foundation account, it should have different people looking at it. And even if the organization is decentralized, like there should be some level of oversight before something hits the public. That's my personal view.
Yeah, I mean, I think to close the loop maybe on that one, yeah, I agree. I agree with Ashley. I mean, it seems like an ad agency production, having worked closely with ad agencies and the type of product they come up with too as well. I mean, sure, could it be a little bit of AI? Maybe, but there were definitely actors involved, and something like that with editing is a 6-7 figure price to pay. So my gut reaction, just having worked in comms for a while, is simply put that they thought the market was going to react differently, And when it didn't, they quickly flipped.
I think it
Yeah,
was a
from
lesson that they only had to learn once.
That's fair. Yeah. I mean, it's a
I-
short news cycle, right? I mean, it was on Twitter and maybe got some outrage for a day or two, but then I guess, we're what, 2 weeks later, and now is, the outrage is sort of passed on to the next topic of the day.
Yeah, Twitter moves on really quickly. But Arika, what you said about, having insider knowledge from kind of like the German Solana side, and they saying that they weren't really aware of what was happening. I think that's very interesting. And if you don't mind, I would like to maybe DM you later and follow up
Yeah.
with that, because that's very, very interesting from my end. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the backlash came from the international community because it was such a United States centric ad. I mean, nobody in the rest of the world is talking about that issue, like any of the issues that were brought up in that ad. And it's such an American perspective. It's really obvious to me, being from the United States, that like it came out of this MAGA movement, and that, the German leaders looking at it were just like, yeah, like that wasn't on purpose. Like nobody, because they have their internal discussions and they're just kind of like, that's not representative of Solana. We all hate it too.
Oh, sorry. I think hang on. Am I still on camera? Okay, sorry. I moved the screen. I think Adam is bringing up some interesting points in our chat. There is definitely room for more controversial or like alternative takes on different subjects. And I think crypto is very much still like a fringe community. And I think that crypto does experiment quite a bit more with this style of marketing, I think, than more public brands, public Web 2 brands do. Just because I think there's, different perspectives, and it can be, maybe not always one way. But no, thanks for bringing that up, Adam. I think it's important to like not underestimate that, yes, well, the ad offended many, maybe that like they did want to challenge certain opinions. And if that's the case, like you have to, like Kevin said, you have to take a stand. If you put something out, stand behind it and explain why. And not just delete the ad and then go dark and then have the CEO of Solana Labs say something 2 days later. I think that's where like there could be a bit more, even if it's a decentralized organization, there could be a bit more oversight, or people that are kind of helping out in situations like this, where it's not just one person responsible for an ad. They send it out and they're like, oh no, I'm getting, dunked on Twitter and I have to delete it. Because that could also have like a lot of brand blowback.
Yeah, Adam brought up a good point. The Kendall Jenner shout out totally makes sense in terms of thinking from another angle. But listen too, like the crypto industry and ads it's been quite an experience even in the last 4 or 5 years. If you look at the FTX Larry David ad, for example, during the Super Bowl, and how that pretty much came true. The Matt Damon ad, fortune favors the bold, etc. I mean, so there is an element to the advertising which a lot of folks in the chat have commented on. The purpose in many cases to drive awareness, and in some cases, whether it's positive or negative, in many cases doesn't really matter. And I get that. So there clearly could be an element of trying to play upon that too, knowing that frankly there is a boatload of regulation and lobbying going on like as we speak, that is likely going to drive the bottom line of a lot of these organizations, going forward as well. And so it's a little bit of a rat race, I think, in that regards.
Well, we're kind of on time, so I want to be conscious and respectful of everyone's time. And I think we have loads of food for thought here. And just seeing how popular the crisis comms conversation is, because there's always different kind of variables coming into play, and it's never quite exactly the same. I think, the CCC and the ACJR should definitely like continue to have this conversation, because we do get a lot of engagement out of it, and I feel like we could just do another hour probably. But again, just respecting everybody's time. Thank you to our panelists, Kevin, Ashley, Naga, and thank you, Arakia, if I'm saying that correctly, for also putting your neck on the block, so to speak.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And yes, for like everyone that was participating in the chat as well, asking your questions. This was great, and also thank you to Joyce and the ACJR for collaborating on this. So yeah, with that, everyone, thank you so much for coming along. There was a recording. I was trying to furiously bang down some notes as well, and we'll circulate that in the coming days. So we'll let you back to your day, your morning, your evening, your afternoon.
Awesome. Thanks for having us. This was great.
Thanks for having us too. Appreciate you setting it up.
Take care.
Thanks, Joyce. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Absolutely great time. Bye, guys.
Take care,
care, Naga.
everybody. Bye-bye.